This is Dr. Jerome Corsi, and today it's Tuesday. It's November 14th, 2023. Thank you for joining us on thetruthcentral.com. We're doing podcasts every weekday. First story I want to cover today has to do with Bobby Kennedy Jr. and his impact on the 2024 election. What's shaping up, I think, here is that we are seeing a third-party candidate like in 1992. So in 1992, when George H.W. Bush was president, he was running for re-election, and we had just gone through the Gulf War. It had been a major uplifting moment for George H.W. Bush's presidency. It's the first time since the Vietnam War that American military had seemed to have a starring role in an international conflict. At any rate, Ross Perot was a businessman in Texas. He had EDS, a computer system that was a very massive at the time computer system. And George H.W. Bush had violated his "I will not raise taxes, read my lips, no new taxes." And the Democrats got him to raise taxes. And then the GOP support for George H.W. Bush's reelection really dwindled. And Ross Perot was able to take enough votes away from George H.W. Bush that Bill Clinton was elected president. Now, there's 1992 and 2024 are not the same situation, except for a third-party candidate being a wild card and trying to figure out how that's going to impact the two major candidates, in this case, Trump and Biden. Now, the other uncertainty is it's not clear that Biden is going to be the candidate. I mean, I know so far he's saying he's going to run for re-election, but the polling is lukewarm at best. And Biden has had trying to tout this Bidenomics when the middle class is being really hurt badly by inflation. So it's not clear that the polling is accurate, and it's not clear that Biden won't drop out at the last minute. And many people feel that Michelle Obama is waiting in the wings to be the last candidate on the stage to save the Democratic Party. Well, if Biden has an incident or has to be removed because of potential dementia, or any number of things can happen. And the politics are very uncertain right now because international events could have a major impact. Unforeseen events in the next few months could be the deciding factor. And we won't know what those are until something happens. But look how shocking, again, the attack on October 7th in Israel was, and now we've got a war with Israel and Hamas. Before October 7th, no one was thinking about that. Okay, so Robert Kennedy in the polling is showing to take about equally from Biden and Trump. He's he's doing extremely well among independent voters. But it looks like even in a three-way race in the battleground states, Robert Kennedy Jr. would be taking about 24% of the vote, which means that Trump's lead in states like Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin is going to be much thinner. So with Kennedy taking about 34% of the voters aged 18 to 29, compared to 30% for Biden and 29% for Trump. I mean, the younger voters are definitely going towards Bobby Kennedy Jr. And the lead is a little bit less strong in voters from age 30 to 44. Now, again, I'm going to caution that these polls are very early. This is extremely, we got a year before we have the election. This is November 2023. It's going to be November 2024. And Kennedy, drawing from younger voters, in part is influenced by his plan to reintroduce 3% mortgages funded by tax-free bonds. Okay, now that's going to be a very popular proposal. And that's going to be a proposal that will carry a lot of weight with voters. So we're looking at a situation where Robert Kennedy Jr. is going to be, in a sense, a pivotal player in the election coming up. And he's not experienced in politics in terms of having run for office. This will be his first real run for office, and he's running for president. And the outrageous thing is, I think he has possibly a chance, depending upon events, depending upon what happens. He cannot be ruled out, and that he could possibly even win the entire election, depending on what happens. And again, those are unpredictable factors. Chris, would you like to comment on this? I mean, this is a pivotal point. I want to start here, then I want to go to the wars, both in Israel and the war in Ukraine, and comment on what's going on, and end this with some stories that will show that I think the green energy businesses are failing badly. Electric vehicles, wind turbines, across the board. I think there is a major impact that the economics of these renewable energy ideas are not panning out. So we'll end the broadcast there. But Chris, would you like to comment here on the RFK story?
There are a lot of ways this could turn. Now, I understand that there's an excitement with a third-party candidate with a name like Kennedy, and the idea is, well, who's going to take votes away from both candidates? Yes. However, as the campaign moves forward, and depending on how the mainstream media covers this, Robert F. Kennedy has gone out in support of reparations, slave reparations. This is going to hurt any support, or let's just say any what's the word am I thinking? Any idea of him taking Trump voters if this is publicized enough. A lot more Trump voters will probably swing backwards or maybe stay home, and that takes Kennedy's percentage down. The other interesting factor is there is a fourth candidate that could take a couple of percentage points from both Biden and Kennedy. That would be Jill Stein.
And Jill Stein played a role again in the last election, I believe, and she is a force. The Democrats will have to be concerned about whether she runs. And why don't you fill us in on who Jill Stein is, Chris?
Well, Jill Stein ran under the Green Party ticket back in 2016 and often takes the blame for taking votes away from Hillary Clinton, while, of course, the Johnson run is ignored when it came to taking votes from Donald Trump. So obviously, if you study the numbers and you think about where things were going to go, one would probably see Johnson and Stein as less of a factor than one might think. If you put their
remind everybody who Johnson is.
Libertarian candidate 2016.
Yeah,
these were those sort of the anti-Hillary and anti-Trump votes that decided to stand against voting for one of the top two.
Right.
You're going to see that again in this one because Biden has not done a good job, and Trump does have a let's say. Has an unlikable factor where people who only vote on personality will say, well, let's just see. Maybe I don't know if I want to stay home. I want to put this towards Kennedy. You're going to see that. That's where Trump's going to lose out a little bit. But it's a lot more left-leaning types are going to say, well, all right, I can handle 4 years of somebody else. We just have to kick this guy out.
Well, there's a lot of unforeseen things yet to happen here. And let's just leave it at that, but we're going to watch it very carefully.
Right.
Now, in terms of the Israel-Hamas war, it looks like Israel has this Gaza hospital surrounded, and there's a lot of news coming out of it about it today. There's evidently a lot of people who died in this hospital, and they're going to have a mass grave to try to get the bodies buried. Israel has created a corridor for the people to leave the hospital, but then the people trying to get out of the hospital were being shot at as they got to the gates of the hospital. And again, it's not clear whether the Israelis were shooting or the Hamas was shooting. Most likely it was Hamas wanting not to let that hospital be taken by Israel because, again, it could be what Israel's claiming, one of the headquarters of operations for Hamas underneath that hospital. Would that be very much like Hamas to do this? And, of course, then the international community is up in arms with Israel besieging a hospital, and there's civilians in the hospital being killed or dying because they're not getting any medical treatment. The hospital's out of fuel. It's dark. I don't know whether the water's on or not, or the electricity is probably not on at all. So again, this is a public relations disaster for Israel. And if Israel cares, I don't know at this point, because Israel is again determined to try to destroy Hamas. But this has been always the problem, is that the public opinion does not support a prolonged Israeli war. And I'm not sure this time how much impact that's going to have on Netanyahu. But the politics are already entering the war in Israel and will determine ultimately how, and Biden is saying that we need to have international support for the hospital, which again is the first sign of U.S. turning against support for Israel and trying to sympathize with the Hamas cause. And certainly no one wants civilians in a hospital to be besieged or harassed or hurt of this nature. Humanitarian instincts would require that the hospital be protected. So again, these are the kinds of conflicting situations that typically occur in the Middle East and make it difficult to determine right and wrong or to side enthusiastically for one side or the other. My heart is always with Israel because I believe biblically that, God, the Bible is clear on this, that God has said that in the covenant with Abraham, that the Jews were given Israel as their homeland. And the Bible said that the Jews would return to the homeland and Israel would be recreated. And this is, again, more end times signals. And I think we are definitely seeing a lot of end time signals right now. So again, that war is right now in a point of pivoting one way or the other. Also, Israel did more attacks on the southern part of Gaza. Gaza is a narrow strip of right along the Mediterranean in Israel, north of Egypt. And the Egyptians do not want the Palestinians to come into Egypt because the Palestinians are the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Army, is a Marxist force, and it is at the same time trying to overturn the governments of any country where it stays. So they're trying to, be revolutionary against Egypt. When they were in Egypt, they did the same thing in Jordan. They got thrown out of Egypt. They got thrown out of Jordan. They got thrown out of Lebanon. And now probably the Palestinians only have the Sinai Desert to go to because no one seems to be ready to take the Palestinians in. Ukraine, war's a stalemate. It's being represented as if World War I in trenches, defensive positions that are entrenched. And again, we're getting reports that are coming out of Ukraine that their forces are depleted. They've taken a large number of casualties, both wounded and dead. They don't have enthusiastic recruits coming back to Ukraine to want to fight for Ukraine. And the United States and the EU are getting tired of supporting the war. So in a sense, it's in a stalemate. Both of these have the potential to expand into regional conflicts and have the potential to go nuclear. And that's, again, part of the difficulties and more of the end times feelings that the world is going into war. We've managed to put Russia and Iran together and China in this unity against the United States. And with Russia and Iran, it certainly sounds like Ezekiel 37:38, the war of Gog and Magog. And those passages say basically sure sound like a nuclear war and that Israel wins because God intervenes. Okay, let's turn to three stories here. And by the way, I want you to get the free book on gold and silver investing. I mean, it's essentially the coming global crash and will create an historic gold rush. I mean, the economy with the amount of debt we've got right now and the middle class being squeezed as the middle class is being squeezed, around the world, the amount of debt is enormous. And the pressure on the debt from the increasing interest rates is taking a toll. This book explains essentially the position of the United States with this much debt. It will push us into a multipolar world. And it's not clear the US dollar will survive in its current state. The BRICS nations now are talking about their own currency, possibly gold-based. Russia's talking about the same thing. You get a free copy of this book by calling 1-800-519-6268. Free copy of how the coming global crash will create an historic gold rush. 1-800-519-6268. And that's Swiss America. Do talk to them about investing. If you invest in gold, you'll have an asset which has risen in these types of crises dramatically. And I know right now gold is hovering around $2,000 an ounce and did crash that barrier over last weekend. But, again, it's right now at $1,960. It was over $2,000 last weekend. And gold has begun trading up in early trading today. And so, again, 1-800, just do yourself a favor, get a copy of this, and pursue the idea of seriously. Gold went to 1973 when we had another war in the Middle East, the Yom Kippur War, and we had the OPEC oil embargo. We could have another oil embargo as a consequence of this war. Gold went from 1971, $35 an ounce when Nixon took us off the gold standard to almost, it was $843 an ounce when Ronald Reagan came in after the Jimmy Carter debacle. And then with the collapse of the subprime mortgage market, gold went to $1,426 an ounce. With COVID, it traded over $2,000 an ounce. Gold, we're having a double whammy right now of a war in the Middle East and pressure on oil from all the renewable fuels and trying to ban gas-powered vehicles by 2030 or 2050 and switch to this sustainable, so-called sustainable renewables, which I'm going to explain in a minute, are just not economically working out very profitably for anyone. So in this kind of economics, one or two events could throw us into a crash, and it could be a major insolvency of a major bank. And I'm reading now where the Bank of America is, even a bank of that size, is having asset problems because of the having to renew office building leases that are not being occupied. 30% occupant is, 30% vacancy dramatically reduces the value of the building. And by the way, I see Governor Newsom is now cleaning up San Francisco because the Chinese are going to visit. And that's drawn news. I mean, our cities, I was in Philadelphia this past weekend, and I'll tell you, it was dangerous. Philadelphia is a mess. Okay, let's turn to these green stories, and there's a number of them out today. First, these renewable energy stocks are getting pounded by short sellers. Okay, so if we look at some of the stocks in particular, 3 weeks ago, shares of the Israel-based solar manufacturer, Solar Edge Technologies, crashed spectacularly after the company issued weak guidance for its upcoming third quarter earnings. And Solar Edge said third quarter revenues, gross margins, and operating income will all come in below the low end of the company's prior guidance. Now, that'll tank that stock hard. And also, a week ago, after the shares of Tesla, the EV, the electric vehicle manufacturer, they were badly hammered following the company's less than stellar third quarter report. The report revealed that Tesla not only missed Wall Street's earning estimates, but its margins have continued to shrink at an alarming clip. Okay, and it just continues to go on. The shorts can smell blood in the water, so dozens of solar and electric vehicle stocks are their targets. In the solar sector, it is Sunrun Inc. and Sonova Energy International are among the 10 most crowded securities in treasury and liquidity management platforms. These are stocks that have been heavily invested in, but they are also now taking a lot of short selling. Short selling means that people are betting the stock is going to go down. They are thinking that they can buy a stock and sell it at a future date where they're going to basically cover that short sell with a profit earned on the options contract. So they can buy the stock and deliver it at a much lower price than the contract was calling for. They essentially win the bet that the stock was going to go down, which is the way they were betting on a short sell. If we go to the next story, we're going to find, if we go take the EV market, which is also getting hit across the board, it's not just Tesla, but titles are, is this the moment of truth for the electric vehicle industry? This was on oilprice.com today. Now, the sales of EVs have been 1 million units sold by year end, which looks good. It's a 50% increase year over year from 2023 going back to 2022. But the problem is that the people who have not yet bought electric vehicles are price-sensitive shoppers, and they're looking at whether or not these expensive cars with an untried technology, a new technology, are a good bet. So the electric vehicles are sitting on the lots unsold, and the companies are taking big losses in producing them. So General Motors has pushed back production launches of EVs and SUVs, including the Chevy Silverado, the GMC Sierra Denali, and the Equinox EVs. Ford has put on hold the construction of a new $12 billion EV factory. Honda has canceled their plan to jointly develop a slate of EVs, saying the economics do not work. Volkswagen announced that it will stop making the ID3 and other forms of electric vehicles because of subsidies and competition from China. Now, hybrids have remained popular, and hybrids may be the winner in this, but people are not willing to abandon their gas vehicles. And what is happening is they're making economic policy by fiat. Biden is saying the bureaucrats are putting in rules, the EPA, et cetera, that we have to have electric vehicles being 60 or 70% of all cars sold by 2030 or 2050. And states like California are passing laws that it's going to be illegal to sell electric vehicles at this time. So we're in a really precarious time for the economics of the renewable market. We're finding the same thing is true when you look at the wind turbine market offshore, which was supposed to be one of the booming markets. But what's happening is, for instance, the U.S. Withdrew from wind turbine building in Norway, and then Ørsted pulled out of it as well. So the Danish company Ørsted is officially withdrawn from a consortium that was going to bid on the Norwegian offshore wind projects just days after Ørsted pulled out of 2 big New Jersey offshore wind turbine projects. So the wind turbine industry is being hit by inflation and by the lack of parts, the production delays. These things take a long time to build. It's not easy to build a wind turbine farm in water. And the offshore farms, are where the wind blows, where people are saying that the land needed. It was very popular to think about wind turbine offshore for a long time, but the economics of it just aren't working. That's the bottom line problem. And if the economics not working, it's going to be very difficult not to avoid what happened to Obama when Obama had all of his Solyndra projects, and we've put billions of dollars again into trying to prop up this industry with all kinds of subsidies, all kinds of tax breaks. And in fact, they just are not economically viable. They don't compare to hydrocarbon fuels when it comes to their efficiency. The grid is set up for hydrocarbon fuels, and this is an ideological driven idea, which is not economically sound. So it's not going to work, no matter how much ideological vigor we put into this. Chris, do you want to comment?
This has never been environmentally friendly. This idea is is based on, I guess, ending the coal industry, ending what's been called the fossil fuel industry, with little regard to the actual environment within the ocean. As you know, there were several humpback whales killed since all of this started. Many of them since, what was it, 2017, 2000, or before that. I don't remember the exact year, but there are at least over 1,000 of these humpback whales killed in these wind turbine yards. And look, we've seen what these abandoned ones and the ones that don't work anymore look like on land. What's going to happen if these companies don't take them out of the ocean?
Well, this is again, we're going to accumulate a lot of junk if the solar and wind don't work. And the ideological nature of this policy, the history is that projects that are started based on ideology and not sound economics have a hard time sustaining themselves, because we can't make a profit at the idea. It's just not going to be long-term viable. And with the increased cost of energy, which is skyrocketing in some countries, you're going to find that this is another factor which is going to eventually cause a crash. So again, get a copy of the free book by calling 1-800-519-6268. We are going to be reporting every weekday, and I want to kind of wrap this up so we stay on time today. Take a look at the homepage. In the upper right-hand corner, we have all the different places where we are broadcasting. Chris, you want to run through that?
Yes, of course. We're broadcasting on video-wise, YouTube, Rumble, BitChute, CloutHub, and Twitter. We do run live on Twitter, so if you feel like pulling us up there, you can find us there easily. We also have Dr. Corsi's website here at truthcentral.com. You can catch all the videos here. You can catch videos on, as I said, Twitter. That's very simple as well on his Twitter site, where Twitter handle is at Corsi Jerome 1. That's at Corsi Jerome 1. I just put it here for those watching now. If you're listening, if you like the audio podcast, we're all over the place. We're on iHeartRadio. I'll say that a little better. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Deezer, Spreaker, TuneIn. Did I say Spotify? I think I did. PodTracker, Podcast, Podbean, Podcast Addict, Spreaker, Amazon Prime, and you can even ask your Alexa to play this program.
Well, I always end up by saying, in the end, God always wins. Some days it seems hard to have faith that we're not going into complete crashes and war and the like. I think we're going to face the judgment of God. We have killed so many babies in the womb, millions, against God's law. God's mandate is to go forth and multiply, not go forth and kill your unborn children. We are taking God out of the schools, out of our lives. It's one of the things I rejoice in with the Hispanic immigration is that these people still believe in God, and their families are strong. We've seen a intentional moral decline in the United States, and the book I've written on that, which is The Truth About Neo-Marxism, Cultural Maoism, and Anarchy, I think it has done a tremendous job to explain how we got here, that the woke live in a different world than we are engaged in right now. And to understand that world, to understand their fundamental difference in thinking, we have to understand how their neo-Marxism has evolved to become an attack on the culture. I do believe God will win, because I think if we follow the admonition of 2 Chronicles 7:14 is for us to get on our knees and ask God to forgive us for having let the world get to this point. And I think we're here now at this time in order to revive the United States' belief in God. That's a turning point. I do believe a moment of revival can occur when we look at the fruits of the tree. We look at the insanity that's going on around us, the homelessness in our cities, which we've never had before, not to this magnitude, certainly not since the 1930s. We're getting told that the Biden economics is doing great things for the economy, yet when you go to the grocery stores, trying to see what $100 will buy. So we're at a turning point right now, and a transformational point where a new age is being born and an old age is dying. And so I remain hopeful, and I see signs that if we continue to affirm the importance of God in our lives and return to God's law, 2 Chronicles 7:14, God will hear our prayer and heal our land. In the end, God always wins. And I do not believe God created the human race to fail. I believe we are here to validate the case that this is a spiritual existence, not a material existence. And the transhumanists, the World Economic Forum, may think they can perfect human beings with machines. But I think from God's point of view, human beings were created exactly the way God intended. And we don't need perfection. We're a fallen race, but we're here despite that flaw to recognize and affirm God in our lives. Dr. Jerome Corsi, today is Tuesday. It's November 14th, 2023. We're doing podcasts on the Truth Central every weekday. We'll be back tomorrow. Thank you for joining us. God bless.